Hey everybody, how you doing? It is Wednesday night, December 16th. We're in month 9 or 10 of this pandemic shutdown. And I'm living in California, Sacramento, California, reporting from here about how we're handling things. Looks like we are in a shelter in place. It's getting pretty hectic over here. The Bay Area is they've had a couple of counties max out on their ICU units are totally full. Sacramento is not on that kind of lockdown yet, but we're getting there. We're getting pretty close. I have a couple of family members who came down with COVID this week. One of them, I got a text. He went to the hospital today. He's probably in ICU. He got a cough that was pretty bad. And my supervisor at work also came down with COVID. So it is floating around. It's everywhere. And, we're just waiting for this vaccine to get distributed to everybody. So until then, it's very important that we all stay distant, keep your social distance from each other when you have to go in public and get your stuff. Keep your mask on at all times when you're out there. Once again, we're doing this to protect each other. And, wash your hands and do all the normal stuff, usually during a flu season. None of this is new. None of this is out of the ordinary or difficult. So it's kind of the least that we can do. And it looks like our leadership has finally got on their thing and is finally making some stuff happen out there. So, as you know, this show is all about holding up a mirror to our leadership and the many failures that they've accomplished over handling this crisis. And I also want to point out that we're in several crises at one time. We have the climate change here in California. We experienced about 2 solid months of just poisonous air. You couldn't really go outside. Sensitive groups could not go outside at all. And then, there was varying degrees. I had some respiratory concerns. I have kind of weak lungs. I have bad allergies and all that kind of thing. And it was terrible. It was there was days where, you had a headache for probably 3 or 4 days straight, and there was ash raining down. So we got the climate crisis happening. We've had an immigration crisis happening and ongoing. And all these things are exacerbated by each other. The stresses that are on our society right now are things that we really haven't gone through, that we've never gone through. There's never been 7.5 billion people on a planet all trying to eat and have shelter and deal with a pandemic. So yeah, we are in deep, to say the least. So this is about COVID mainly, but we also do want to highlight the other crises that are happening. The name of this show is Essential, and I'm trying to focus on that concept of what is essential, what is the essence of a country, what makes a society, and at what point do things really start breaking down? You're not a society anymore. You're just kind of, in survival mode with other people. We're still pretty far from that. All of our problems seem to be man-made, pretty much. Flow of money is not really happening right now. Congress has to argue about every little thing. Even though we're well within the bounds of this system, this capitalist system that they've designed to keep us all, keep the taxes flowing. But they're not opening the spigot when it comes to keeping people in their homes, keeping people safe. And part of this is our own failure. We don't really demand this of our leadership. So, this could be a good moment to reflect on all this kind of stuff. My guest today is an attorney who specializes in immigration law. And, there's a vast industry that is built up for law enforcement. And a huge part of that is directed at our border, specifically the border with Mexico. There's a lot of reasons for this. But the fact of the matter is that people get contracts to build walls and build holding facilities and then manage those facilities and populate those facilities with employees. People make livings doing this kind of stuff. So there's a big pull to get involved in those kind of things and keep those things going. One of the functions of a border, though, is to manage the flow of human beings, and people have legitimate reasons for escaping their countries and coming to this one to work, and not to mention that there's a huge incentive for people to come here and work. Our agriculture and meat industries both depend on very cheap labor and a constant supply of that. So I've seen immigrants be used, particularly Latinx immigrants, be used as football in the immigration battles that both Democrats and Republicans have taken part in over time. My guest today is an attorney, and she sticks herself right in the middle of there. She is out there representing people who are facing the U.S. border control and immigration apparatus and who would otherwise be alone. They might not speak English very well, and they need representation very, very badly. So anyway, we're going to talk to her and see how her job has changed, and what the essence of that job is, and what it means to be doing that job continually in a pandemic. So Tiffanis Sharp, I'm going to bring her into the conversation now. Maybe. There you go.
Hey.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much for hosting this.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Right on. So talk to us a little bit about what your job is in general in a time of not pandemic.
Okay. So in a time of not pandemic, I've been practicing immigration since, I started practicing immigration by lining Black and brown men up for what was then called special registration after September 11th. So I've been in this field since 2001, so almost 20 years. And it's changed, depending on the global sort of climate and environment. The type of work that I do has changed over the 20 years. But really since 2014, when the gang violence really started to escalate in Mexico, Central and South America, and their own governments were unable to control the violence, and in many, if not most cases, were complicit in it. Since that time, and when people have been essentially fleeing those countries and fleeing that just horrific gang violence, coming up to our southern border to come in and seek asylum, that's been what I've been doing mostly since that time, since the caravans first started. Now the caravans really started before they became big news. They really became news during the 2000 and the events leading up to the 2016 election, but the internal climate, the internal country climates that were, forcing people to flee started a few years before that. And so that's what I do primarily now. I represent, I do other things, but in addition, other immigration related work in addition to that, but 90% of my work now is representing individuals who are seeking asylum in the United States or have been living here for, 20, 30, decades. And with the new administration's push on deporting our community members in this sense, representing them in those and trying to get them to stay in those proceedings as well. So for about the past, 6 years, I do mostly asylum cases.
Okay, I see.
And that's like affirmative asylum. So when people come in and they don't get caught at the border, but they still want to ask to be allowed to stay in the U.S. and they want to affirmatively petition the Department of Homeland Security to allow them to stay. And also defensively, where people do come up, again, they come up through these caravans, they get caught at the border or they get caught inside the border and then get put into court, federal court removal proceedings. And I represent them in those instances.
I see. How do people find you? Are you court appointed or
No,
appointed?
so yeah, so in immigration, what the Supreme Court, some, 20, 30 years ago ruled actually that immigration enforcement is not criminal in nature. And what that means is that therefore people aren't afforded the right to have representation appointed to them. They're not afforded that constitutional right to have an attorney represent them at the government's expense. So the court doesn't appoint immigration attorneys. I get most of my I get all of my clients, whether through whatever, just through word of mouth. I did start doing some work with a nonprofit agency in addition to my own law offices, helping them out initially to just kind of get their legal department in compliance and squared away, and then once the courts, the court system started to get flooded with people that the government was trying to deport, they contracted me to do a lot of their removal cases because I've had the most experience. So all of my clients are referrals, word of mouth. I don't do any advertising. People find me and come to me, and that's been working for about 20 years. So.
Okay, well, I'm doing a little advertising for you right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, so can you talk about like why did the caseload get so high in recent times? It seems like some kind of stress, is put on the system.
It's a number of factors that all came to fruition at once. So the court system was already impacted significantly by the caravans. And as I mentioned, the caravans and people fleeing this gang violence and government corruption had started really before the 2016 election when people started talking about it. So the courts have been they've been just packed and behind schedule for years. And so that was always, they were already behind. And, as governments started to, I'm going to just say the governments are failing. A lot of the Mexican, Central and South American governments are just simply failing. And so as this declines, then more people start fleeing and coming up. And so it's a combination of that, and also, since the 2016 election, the rhetoric, we're not giving as much support to the Central, South American and Mexican governments as far as like just humanitarian aid, basic aid. And so those governments don't even have money to help their own citizens. And if they did, there's the corruption factor. So there's a lot of politics involved. Also, the courts, the remedies that are available are not what they used to be under the Obama administration. Now, the Obama administration deported a lot of people, and like a lot of people don't understand that. But the people that the Obama administration was trying to remove from the country are those people that had like violent criminal records that have been previously deported and come back in. But at the same time, the Obama administration put a lot of remedies in place, like DACA. They had policies where if somebody wasn't a danger or threat to society, they would let them out on bond. It was more lenient for those community members that were really contributing to the community and the people that we want to, have around us and in our community. And the focus was on getting people that really should have been there in the first place, as far as like criminal convictions and prior deportations out. Under this administration, that's changed. There's been like no leniency whatsoever. And so you've got mothers and their children sitting in detention, and going through this court process where the immigration judges are under constant pressure to free up their caseload. And you've got like one of my youngest clients was a mother, and she was 18 years old, and her child was 2 years old, right? So like she had this child and she's 16, and like caravanned up from South America. And so you've got these really basically like children and their children who are not don't understand their rights, are scared, are on the impression that we're going to help them and take care of them as a U.S. government, and they come up to the border and they don't get that help. They get judges that are, in some cases, unsympathetic, in other cases sympathetic, but there's the pressure under the Trump administration to, like, lighten their load, turn them and burn them, basically, and encouraging people to accept deportation or removal. It's just the system was already stressed, and then you add to that this administration stressing it even further with the policies that they put in place at the border, the internal policies that they put in place, the constant efforts to do away with those remedies that the Obama administration had put in place that were like helping to alleviate a lot of the court stress, like DACA, and just the general condition of the internal countries themselves. It's a perfect storm, and now we've got the pandemic, which is just another another brick in the brick in the wall, I guess you could say.
No, it's a huge barrier for sure.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something that there was some new news on DACA that you wanted to put out there.
Yeah. So this administration has been trying to do away with DACA since it got into power. And the Republicans never liked it in the first place, because listen, I've been doing this. We've been talking about immigration reform that I can cognitively remember since 2004, right? That's when Department of Homeland Security was created, or became functioning. So we've been talking about immigration reform for decades, right? And nothing was getting done. Finally, the Obama administration put into via executive order, not to get into the sausage making of law, but an executive order is just an order the president signs, and there it is. It doesn't go through the legislative process. So President Obama, after waiting for Congress, nobody could come to any agreement, he implemented DACA through an executive order. This very much upset the Republicans, who didn't like this, exertion of executive power. And so since the Trump administration has gotten in, they've been trying to do away with that. The problem is that, constitutionally, it's very hard once somebody's given a right, and undocumented individuals are afforded constitutional protection. So even though they're not U.S. citizens or permanent residents, they're afforded certain constitutional protections, because anybody that's physically in this country on U.S. territory is. And so that being said, via due process, if you give somebody a right, it's very difficult to take it away. Now imagine, as a woman, Black woman, somebody says, hey, Black woman, you can't vote anymore. That's not going to fly. I mean, it's legislation, but it's very hard to take something away once it's already given. So that being said, the Trump administration has been trying to do away with or significantly lessen the impact of DACA. However, and this has been going on for 4 years, right? Like, there's these games that have been being played. Finally, what has happened is, the courts ruled that long story short, they didn't have the authority to actually do away with DACA because of this administration's way of how they're trying to put people into office, not going through congressional approval, making them all temporary. The court said, well, the person, the head of DHS that was trying, implemented this, had no authority to do so because they were only acting in temporary. So with everything being said and done, DACA, which is deferred action for childhood arrivals, has gone back to what it originally was when the Obama administration implemented it. And that's a huge 360, coming back around 360, because at each step, this administration's been trying to do away with it. At first, they were saying no new DACA, only renewals, and then it was renewals are only a year versus 2 years, which meant basically the filing fee doubled. So there was all of these barriers that were being put up to getting DACA. Those are no more. You can get DACA as if we were under the Obama administration. Wouldn't that be nice?
Interesting. So it's just like all the rest of it just didn't happen.
No, if only the rest of these 4 years could just be swept away like it never happened. That would be amazing. But with DACA, wishful thinking. But with DACA, it, not to minimize the people that have been harmed and affected in the process, but it is now back to where it originally was, and that's a really good thing because that's how it always should have been.
Yeah, I mean that's great, but Jesus Christ, like we come back around to where we started after 4 years,
And you know what that means is that we haven't gotten any further along progressively.
Right. No progress has happened.
We've taken so many. This administration, not just with DACA, but just with immigration policy, in general, is taking so many steps backwards that the steps forward, although they're to be celebrated, we're still not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? DACA's not a permanent solution. It never was. It was something that the Obama administration or President Obama himself implemented as a Band-Aid, sort of a quick fix while legislation could be passed, right? And still to this day, no legislation has made it. And so it's still not a permanent solution. So we still don't have a permanent solution.
Right.
But at least it's gone back to what it was pre-Trump administration.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just one of the, we don't have time to talk about all of the ways in which this administration has done away with things that benefit immigrants, but gradually the courts, thank goodness for them, are like reversing them or saying like, no, you can't do that in a number of cases.
Yeah.
And so, even with the court cases, a lot of immigration attorneys and I have been telling people, like, let's just try to hold out until we get a new administration. Hopefully that, this was before the election. Hopefully that will be sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
But, there's no way that anybody in their right mind would keep these in place. So.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's probably a good moment to make the note that the reason these drug cartels or these cartels are so powerful and have so much money is because they are moving a lot of product, and their biggest market is right here in the U.S.
Their biggest market is here because here's the thing: people in these countries, like El Salvador, Nicaragua, Mexico, they can't afford the product.
Right.
So, I mean, this has always been the case.
Yeah.
Even before the cartels took over. I mean, the whole, don't even get me started on how the cartels came into power, because that's us too.
Yeah.
That's a discussion for a different day. And I don't mean just us because we're the primary consumer. I mean, like our government, funded a lot of these individuals to take over their governments, and we've just been too successful, and they have, and now we've backed out of supporting them for various reasons, and now their citizens are fleeing and coming to us, and get treated as such.
Yeah, I mean, and ironically, people come here because of our propaganda. We're the land of freedom. We accept all, poor, tired, huddled masses. And
do you know, can I just tell you, out of my 20 years, I have not, and I've had clients from all over the world. I have not had one client speak disparagingly of this country.
Yeah.
Regardless of everything they've been through in this country and every way they've been treated.
Yeah.
Not a single one, even one sitting in detention, for years. Not a one has anything negative to say about this country.
Yeah.
And so it's really something, it's
they're ready. They're ready to make it work. They went through a lot to make this work.
And they want to be good participants and citizens, right? I have clients that make up social security numbers just so they can pay taxes, right? Like, it's a huge sense of pride to be able to, like, pay taxes and contribute. And there's a whole discussion to be had about, talk about essential workers. Like, those are the essential workers, right?
Yeah, literally.
They've always been essential. They've always been essential workers to our, food supply system, our hospitality system, landscaping, essentially the jobs that Americans don't want to do but are essential to our way of living, that we are so, accustomed to, our high standard of lifestyle. They're essential to us having this lifestyle. And, they work out in 110-degree heat. I have an office in Modesto, so there's a lot of farming out there. And, it gets to be like 110 and 112 degrees out here. And they're out there working, no health care, no public assistance, and taking pride in doing that job, and happy to be doing it.
Yeah.
Regardless of how they're treated.
Yeah.
And, in many cases, speaking of in these pandemic times, not like being taken care of the way that, like, an employer should be taking care of an employee, right? Health-wise. I had a client that, died of COVID working out in the fields in the Fresno area. And just wasn't, and I'm sure his employer could care less, as long as they're replaceable, and
they are replaceable. Yeah.
And they are, because there's a lot of, there's tons of immigrants or, community members from other countries that are willing to step in and do that job. I can tell you, I don't want to do the job. I'm pretty sure you don't want to do the job. I don't know anybody that does. So it's I
want to. there's no way I could. Like, physically, I couldn't handle that.
You wouldn't want to. Trust me. Like, working out in the fields on 110-degree days, wearing long sleeves so you don't get sunburned, harvesting watermelons and things like that. Nobody. I don't want that job. I don't want to see you doing that job. Like, it's hard work, but people are doing these jobs, and happy to be doing them, doing all of the essential. You look at, like, every single essential worker field, right? And there's a high immigrant population that is doing those jobs, right? And when you're talking about immigrants who, maybe can't get health care, or are getting paid under the table, can't get public, some benefits and things, or just are afraid to, for whatever reason, or don't want to be a tax on our system, right? Because they want to be good community members, and they want to put into the system rather than take out of it. These are individuals who are really severely impacted by the pandemic. Everything that we as individuals have to go through during the pandemic, they are doubly, triply, quadruply impacted because of, how this country, in most cases, treats them.
Yep. And I think that that kind of brings us right about to our time limit here. I
told you I could talk about this for a long time.
I know, that's good. When I get a real podcast, I'll have you back on.
Yeah, there's a lot to, but I would say this for anybody, if you're an immigrant, or your family, if you have immigrants in your family, thank you. If you are not an immigrant, you need to really, and you're eating pineapple, whatever you're eating, or you're, going to some place and being serviced, taken care of, you should thank an immigrant, whether they are here documented or undocumented, because really they're the ones that they're essentially the glue that's holding this country together, particularly right now.
Right. I think we do. It's easy to forget that, food just magically appears on the shelves. And when you go to a restaurant, the food just, it's prepared by some cook that just,
right.
Yeah. There's a whole team. There's it's all immigrants, you know,
That's
all
right.
the
It's all immigrants, you know, and these higher standards of cleaning that most buildings and things have now. Who do you think's doing these jobs, right?
Yeah.
And being exposed, even more exposed. So
Right.
I think that as Americans, you know, I've traveled all around the world, and the one thing that always strikes me about us here is our propensity to complain about stupid stuff. I almost said and not appreciate actually like what we have and who is making sure that we have these
Right.
things.
Right.
And you know, healthcare workers, yes, we need to absolutely thank them. Also thank immigrants, because a lot of them are healthcare workers, right? Emptying out bedpans and poop and throw up and vomit and putting themselves at risk, and probably aren't even getting that same level of care for themselves that they're giving others.
Yeah. Excellent note. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jesse.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And everybody out there in the world, stay masked up. It looks like we're almost through this thing, but just hang in there.
Wear your mask. Wear your mask.
Wear your mask. All right, I will see everybody. I think there's only one episode happening next week due to the holiday, but it's going to be a good one. And yeah, hope to see everyone there. All right, take care.
Man,